Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
That Tuesday evening when I discovered the truth about my wife changed everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd spent 8 years loving. I'm Edward, and until that moment, I believed Sophia and I had built something solid together. She was brilliant, stunning, and had this magnetic personality that drew people in, the same qualities that had captivated me from our very first meeting. But underneath all that charm, she was hiding a version of herself I never could have imagined. The whole mess started innocently enough when Sophia walked through our front door one weeknight and mentioned, almost too casually, that her supervisor, Mr. Richardson, had extended a dinner invitation to both of us. "This could really boost my career prospects," she explained, flashing that bright smile that seemed slightly off somehow. "He specifically wants to meet you too. Says it matters for some reason." Initially, I didn't give it much thought. Sophia had always been driven when it came to advancing professionally, and I respected that ambition in her. But something about how she couldn't quite meet my eyes that evening nagged at me. I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself she was probably just anxious about making a good impression. The evening of the dinner, Sophia had transformed herself into absolute perfection. She'd chosen this form-fitting black dress that commanded attention from every angle. When I complimented how incredible she looked, her smile seemed genuine, but it never quite reached her eyes. She appeared restless, constantly checking her phone as notifications kept lighting up the screen. We pulled up to an expensive restaurant, one of those places where the atmosphere whispers money and the menu doesn't bother listing prices. Richardson had claimed a private corner booth and rose to greet us as we approached. He was an imposing figure with this overwhelming sense of self-importance that seemed to consume the entire space around him. His handshake felt calculated, and his gaze lingered on Sophia far longer than appropriate. "Edward, pleasure to finally meet you," he said, his smile never warming his cold eyes. Then, turning his full attention to my wife, he added, "Sophia, you're absolutely radiant this evening." I should have paid attention to how her entire face lit up at his compliment, but somehow I missed it entirely. The dinner started normally enough. Typical conversation about business, investments, and Richardson's recent international travels. He dominated every topic, frequently interrupting whenever I attempted to contribute something to the discussion. Sophia, however, appeared completely entranced by his every word, laughing at his jokes and nodding enthusiastically at everything he said. It wasn't until our second course arrived that the evening took a sinister turn. Richardson leaned closer to Sophia, dropping his voice to this intimate whisper that excluded me completely. She actually blushed and giggled in a way I hadn't witnessed in years. Then he made his move, bold and shameless. His hand found its way onto her thigh beneath the table. Time froze. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth as I watched Sophia glance down at his wandering hand, but she made absolutely no effort to remove it. Instead, she gave him this nervous little laugh that made my stomach turn. Fury built in my chest, but I forced myself to remain composed. "Richardson," I said, keeping my voice level but firm, "care to explain why your hand is on my wife?" He didn't even flinch. Instead, he leaned back with this arrogant smirk and replied, "Take it easy, Edward. We're all grown-ups here, just enjoying ourselves." Sophia shot me a panicked look, her eyes wide with alarm. "It's nothing, Edward," she said hastily. "Please don't create a scene." "Nothing." My heart plummeted at her words. She was actually defending him. I gripped my hands into fists under the table, fighting every instinct to explode. "Enjoying ourselves," I repeated, my voice dripping with contempt. Fascinating way to describe molesting another man's wife. Richardson chuckled, completely unbothered by my accusation. "You're being dramatic," he said, casually sipping his wine. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned back and forced myself to think clearly. There was no way this was ending here, but I needed to stay rational. I had to play this smart. As dinner progressed, I began noticing more troubling signs. Shared glances, inside references, and the way Richardson seemed to know intimate details about Sophia that he had no business knowing. My suspicions multiplied with every passing minute, but I kept my emotions locked down, determined to uncover the complete truth. By dessert time, I'd seen enough. I excused myself for the restroom but detoured to the hostess station instead. Quietly slipping her a $50 bill, I asked if she could provide me with copies of the reservation details and any receipts connected to our table. She hesitated initially but eventually agreed to help. When I returned to the table, Richardson and Sophia were sharing some private joke that stopped abruptly the moment they spotted me. Their laughter died, and they tried to look innocent. I sat down and smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. Inside, I was seething, but I knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. That silent drive home felt suffocating. The engine's usual hum seemed amplified in the tension that filled the space between us. I glanced over at Sophia, who stared fixedly out her window, nervously fidgeting with her purse strap. Neither of us had spoken since leaving the restaurant, but my thoughts were screaming. The hostess had discreetly handed me those receipts before we left, and they felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in my jacket pocket. I didn't need to examine them yet. I already suspected they'd reveal something devastating. When we finally reached our driveway, Sophia broke the silence. "You humiliated me tonight," she said, her tone sharp with accusation. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at her words. "I humiliated you? Your boss practically had his hands all over you, and somehow I'm the problem here?" "It wasn't like that," she snapped, finally turning to face me directly. "You're completely overreacting to nothing." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Sophia, you didn't even attempt to stop him. What exactly was I supposed to think?" She rolled her eyes and stepped out of the car, slamming the door with unnecessary force. I sat there for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This wasn't the woman I'd married. Inside the house, she headed straight for our bedroom, slamming that door too. I stood in the living room, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had just happened. Then I remembered those receipts. Settling onto the couch, I pulled them out and studied them under our lamp's dim light. There were 3 receipts total, 2 from tonight and 1 from earlier in the week. My stomach churned as I read through the details. The first receipt was from tonight's dinner, but it included an extra charge I didn't recognize, a bottle of champagne delivered to the table before my arrival. I never saw any champagne tonight. The second receipt was dated 2 days earlier, from the same restaurant, but for only 2 people. Sophia never mentioned going out that night. The third one was the most damaging, from an upscale hotel downtown, dated 3 weeks ago. A suite reserved under Richardson's name with an additional guest listed, Sophia Edwards, my wife. My hands trembled as I stared at the proof. My suspicions weren't just paranoid imagination, they were completely justified. The bedroom door creaked open, and Sophia emerged with an annoyed expression. "Are you coming to bed, or are you planning to pout down here all night?" I slipped the receipts back into my pocket and managed a neutral expression. "I'll be up shortly." She didn't argue, just shrugged and returned to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her again. I sat there for hours, those receipts burning in my pocket while my mind raced through possibilities. Had this affair been going on for weeks? Months? How long had I been the oblivious fool? By the time I dragged myself to bed, dawn was breaking. Sophia was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire world had shifted beneath me. The next morning, Sophia acted as if absolutely nothing had happened. She greeted me with a cheerful, "Good morning," while sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone at the kitchen counter. I played along, masking my anger and suspicion behind a facade of normalcy. I needed more than receipts before confronting her. I needed undeniable evidence that would force her to admit everything. That day, I called my friend Nathan, a private investigator who'd helped me once before with a work-related issue. I trusted him completely. "Nathan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need you to investigate someone for me. It's personal." Nathan never asked unnecessary questions. It was one of his best qualities. "Send me the information," he replied in his calm, professional tone. I gave him everything I had: Richardson's name, the hotel receipt, the timeline I'd constructed from the evidence so far. "I don't want to jump to conclusions," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew the truth was staring me in the face. "Edward," Nathan said after a pause, "I'll handle this, but you need to prepare yourself for whatever I discover." "I am," I lied. That evening, Sophia was unusually affectionate. She wrapped her arms around me while I cooked dinner, something she hadn't done in months. It felt rehearsed, like she was overcompensating for something. "You've been so quiet today," she said softly. "Is everything all right?" I smiled, hiding the storm raging inside me. "Just tired," I replied. She nodded and kissed my cheek before heading to the living room. I watched her go, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. The following days felt like an elaborate chess match. Every move I made was calculated, every word carefully chosen. Sophia continued acting as though everything was normal, but I couldn't unsee the cracks in her performance. Her phone constantly glued to her hand, sudden work meetings that appeared out of nowhere. A week later, Nathan called. "I've got what you need," he said, his tone somber. "But you're not going to like any of it." "I already don't like it," I replied, my voice barely audible. "Meet me at my office tomorrow," he said. As I hung up the phone, my heart pounded. Whatever Nathan had discovered was going to confirm what I already knew in my gut. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. The next morning, I left the house before Sophia woke up, without saying a word. My destination was Nathan's office, a modest but professional space in a downtown office building. As I parked and walked in, my stomach was twisted in knots. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what he'd found, but there was no turning back now. Nathan greeted me with his usual serious expression, but I could see in his eyes that he understood the weight of what he was about to share. "Edward, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat down, my palms damp with nervous sweat. Nathan pulled out a thick folder filled with photographs and documents, sliding it across the desk toward me. "You asked for the truth," he said quietly. "Here it is." My hands shook as I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a series of photographs showing Sophia and Richardson together, at restaurants, in his car, walking into the same hotel that matched the receipt I'd found. Then came the more damaging photos. Sophia and Richardson in the hotel suite, curtains open just enough for Nathan's camera to capture them in an unmistakable embrace, their bodies pressed together in a way that left no room for innocent interpretation. I felt like someone had driven a knife straight through my chest. "There's more," Nathan said gently, sliding another set of documents toward me. I picked them up and scanned through them. Credit card statements showing hotel stays, expensive dinners, and even jewelry purchased from high-end stores. Jewelry I'd never seen before in my life. "She's been seeing him for at least 6 months," Nathan continued. "Maybe longer." I traced his credit card transactions, and they aligned perfectly with her work schedule. I sat there in stunned silence, the full weight of the betrayal crashing over me like a tsunami. How did I not see this?" I muttered. "Sometimes we don't want to see it," Nathan replied compassionately. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. But it wasn't just anger at Sophia. It was rage at myself for trusting her, for believing in the life we'd built together. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That's your decision," Nathan said. "But whatever you choose, do it intelligently. Don't let your emotions control your actions." I nodded, barely processing his words. I left his office with the folder in hand, its weight feeling impossibly heavy. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts were chaotic, each one more turbulent than the last. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes trying to collect myself. But no amount of deep breathing could prepare me for what I had to do next. Sophia was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "You're home early," she said cheerfully. I didn't respond. Instead, I set the folder down on the counter directly in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her smile beginning to falter. "Open it," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Her hands trembled as she flipped open the folder. The color drained from her face as she looked through the photographs and documents. "Edward, I can explain," she stammered. "Explain what?" I snapped, my composure finally cracking. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months? How you've been sneaking around with your boss while I was here trusting you completely?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but they only fueled my anger further. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything," she said weakly. "Does this look like nothing to you?" I shouted, pointing at the photographs. "You're in a hotel room with him, Sophia. You're wearing jewelry he bought you. You've been living a completely double life." She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't know how to stop," she cried. He pressured me. I didn't want to lose my job." Her excuses only made me angrier. "Don't you dare blame this on him," I said coldly. "You had choices, Sophia, and you chose to betray me, over and over again." For a moment, the room was silent except for her quiet sobs. Then she looked up at me, her face red and tear-streaked. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to throw her out right then and there, but I knew I needed to be strategic. This wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about making sure I came out of this with my dignity intact. You'll find out soon enough, I said icily. That night, I slept in the guest room, unable to even look at her. As I lay awake, my mind churned with plans. Sophia and Richardson thought they could make a fool of me, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The following morning, the house felt eerily quiet. Sophia stayed in the bedroom while I sat in the kitchen, sipping my coffee and staring at the folder of evidence I'd left on the table. It felt like a bomb waiting to explode, and I was holding the detonator. I couldn't sit there forever. I had decisions to make. Revenge wasn't what I wanted, not yet at least. What I wanted was clarity, control, and a plan that left no loose ends. I called Nathan again, his number now memorized. Nathan, I need more, I said firmly. More? He asked, clearly surprised. Edward, I already gave you everything you need. I want to know everything, I said, gripping the phone tightly. Every text, every call, every meeting they've had. I want their complete timeline. Can you get that for me? There was a pause before Nathan sighed. It's going to take a few days, but I'll get it done. Good, I said. And Nathan, keep this discreet. I don't want Sophia or Richardson catching wind of this investigation. Understood. Hanging up, I felt a surge of determination. If Sophia thought she could manipulate me with her crocodile tears, she was in for a rude awakening. When Sophia finally emerged from the bedroom, her face was puffy from crying and she looked like she hadn't slept at all. Edward, she began hesitantly, can we talk? I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. Talk? Sure, go ahead, Sophia. Talk. She winced at the coldness in my voice. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what I was thinking. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. Never meant to hurt me? Sophia, you've been sneaking around for months, maybe longer, and I'm supposed to believe this was all some kind of mistake? It was a mistake, she insisted, tears streaming down her face again. I don't even know why I let it happen. I was scared of losing my job, and he made me feel like I had no choice. Her words were like acid on an open wound. You had no choice, I said, my voice rising. You had every choice, Sophia. You could have said no. You could have told me. You could have quit. But instead, you chose him. You chose to betray me over and over again. She collapsed onto a chair, sobbing into her hands. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly swallowed by the weight of her betrayal. I can't do this right now, I said, standing up and grabbing my keys. I need some space. Before she could respond, I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. The first place I went was my lawyer's office. His name was Gregory Mitchell, and he'd handled a few minor legal matters for me in the past. When I explained the situation to him, his expression hardened. Edward, you need to protect yourself, Gregory said. If this turns into a divorce, and it likely will, you need to make sure you're in the strongest position possible. I nodded. That's why I'm here. I want to know what my options are. Gregory leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. We'll start by gathering financial records. You'll need to figure out if she's been spending your joint money on this guy. If she has, we can use that against her in court. You'll also want to document everything, he continued. Emails, texts, anything that proves her infidelity. I've already got a PI working on that, I said. Good, Gregory replied. And one more thing. Don't let her know what you're planning. The element of surprise is your best weapon right now. By the time I left Gregory's office, I felt more in control. I wasn't going to let Sophia or Richardson ruin my life. I had a plan now, and I was going to see it through. When I got home, Sophia was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes red and swollen. Edward, she said softly, please, I need you to believe me. I love you. I stood there, staring at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the woman in those photographs. You love me? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. If this is love, Sophia, I'd hate to see what hate looks like. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time, I said firmly. Don't ask me for anything else right now. She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, she whispered. But I wasn't sure if it could be fixed. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, and something else I couldn't quite identify. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. I was just getting started. The following day, I began piecing everything together like a detective solving his own case. I went through our shared accounts, credit card statements, and even Sophia's email history on her laptop while she was out of the house. Each discovery chipped away at the foundation of the life I thought we had. I found charges to luxury boutiques where I'd never seen her wear a single item purchased. Hotel reservations that matched the dates on the receipts Nathan had given me. Even expensive meals she'd claimed were client dinners, but clearly involved only 2 people. It was like discovering a second life, a secret world she'd built behind my back. But what cut the deepest were the messages. I hadn't expected to find anything there, figuring she'd be smart enough to delete them. However, there were still traces of conversations on her synced email account. One exchange stood out. Richardson. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait for our next meeting. Sophia. Me too. Let's just be careful. Edward is starting to ask questions. The casual cruelty of their words made my blood boil. Not only had she betrayed me, but she'd also been mocking my trust. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling with rage. If there had been any part of me that wanted to believe her sob story about being pressured, it was gone now. She wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. That evening, I returned home just as Sophia was setting the table for dinner. She greeted me with an artificial smile, trying to act as if nothing had happened. I made your favorite, she said, her voice overly sweet. I sat down without a word, watching her bustle around the kitchen. The effort she was putting into pretending everything was normal was almost laughable. Over dinner, I decided to test the waters. How was work today? I asked, keeping my tone casual. She hesitated for a split second before responding. Busy as always, she said, avoiding my gaze. Lots of meetings. Meetings, huh? I said, raising an eyebrow. With Richardson? Her fork clattered onto her plate. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice defensive. Nothing, I said, leaning back in my chair. Just curious how often you two get to see each other during the day. Her face turned pale and she quickly looked down at her food. I told you, Edward, it's strictly professional. I smirked, though there was no humor in it. Strictly professional? Is that what you call hotel suites and late-night dinners? Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. What are you talking about? I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened one of the photos Nathan had sent me, a clear shot of her and Richardson walking hand in hand into a hotel. I slid the phone across the table toward her. She stared at it, her hands shaking. Edward, Save it, I said, cutting her off. I've seen enough. You can stop lying now. Her lips trembled as tears filled her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean for it to happen. Sophia, this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was planned, deliberate, and you were completely on board. She broke down sobbing into her hands. I was stupid, okay? I let myself get swept up in his world, and I didn't know how to get out. I shook my head, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Stop trying to play the victim. You had every chance to tell me the truth and you chose not to. You knew exactly what you were doing. The room fell silent except for her muffled cries. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the messages, the photos, and the lies. I'm done, I said finally, standing up. I don't know what our next steps are, but this is over. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with terror. Edward, please don't say that. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. I'll do anything. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I'll be sleeping in the guest room again, I said coldly. And tomorrow, I'll be meeting with my lawyer to figure out where we go from here. I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing at the table. As I shut the guest room door behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. I was finally taking control of the situation, but it came at the cost of everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The next morning, I received a call from Nathan. Edward, I've got one more thing for you, he said. What is it? I asked, my heart sinking at the thought of more bad news. I traced Richardson's financials further. He's been transferring money to an account in Sophia's name. It's not a joint account, it's hers alone. I gripped the phone tightly, my mind racing. How much? About $50,000 over the past 6 months, Nathan replied. I thought you'd want to know. $50,000. Money he'd been funneling to her behind my back while I'd been working late nights and sacrificing to build a future for us. Thanks, Nathan, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This confirms everything I needed to know. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of finality. There was no coming back from this. The woman I'd married, the life I'd built, it was all an illusion. That evening, when Sophia tried to approach me with another tearful apology, I simply handed her a business card. What's this? She asked. My lawyer's contact information, I said. You'll be hearing from him soon. She broke down, collapsing onto the couch as sobs racked her body. But this time, I didn't feel pity. I felt empty. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days, I said, turning to leave. Don't call me. I need space to figure out what comes next. As I walked out the door, her cries echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. This was just the beginning of her reckoning. The hotel room was a temporary escape, but it gave me the clarity I needed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of control over my life. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I opened my laptop and began drafting the divorce papers with Gregory's guidance. Every line, every clause felt like a nail in the coffin of a life I thought was unbreakable. I worked late into the night, with Gregory's advice echoing in my mind. Stay calm, stay strategic. Emotions wouldn't help me now. Facts and leverage would. The next morning, I received a call from Nathan. Edward, I've got one last piece of the puzzle, he said, his tone grave. What is it? I asked, already bracing for more bad news. Richardson isn't just involved with your wife, he said. He's been using company funds to cover their expenses. Hotels, gifts, even those financial transfers, it's all illegal. If his board finds out, he's finished. The revelation hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just an affair, it was a scandal waiting to explode. Send me everything, I said. Every detail. By the time I returned home later that evening, I had a plan. Sophia was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. Edward, she began. Save it, I interrupted, dropping a folder on the table in front of her. Do you recognize this? Her hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the documents and photos inside. Where did you get this? She whispered. Doesn't matter, I said coldly. What matters is that I have everything I need to ruin both you and Richardson. His career, your reputation, it's all hanging by a thread. She looked up at me, panic etched across her face. Edward, please don't do this. I'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, I replied, my voice steady. I've already spoken to my lawyer. These divorce papers are ready to be filed. And if you fight me on anything at all, I'll make sure this evidence finds its way to Richardson's board of directors. Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. Edward, I'll sign, she sobbed. I'll do whatever you want. Good, I said, my tone icy. Because this is your one chance to leave with some shred of dignity. Don't push me. That night, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The end was in sight, and for the first time in weeks, I could see a future beyond the mess Sophia and Richardson had created. But as I sat alone in the guest room, I couldn't shake the bitterness in my chest. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my life. The day Sophia signed the divorce papers, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no victory in this moment, only closure. She barely spoke as she slid the signed documents across the table, her hands shaking. I took them without a word, stood up, and walked away. That night, I didn't feel the anger I had carried for so long. The betrayal, the pain, the lies, it was all in the past now. My focus wasn't on what I had lost, but on what I had gained. Clarity, freedom, and the opportunity to rebuild my life on my own terms. The weeks that followed were a time of reflection. I moved into a new apartment, a simple space that felt more like home than the house I had shared with Sophia ever did. I went back to hobbies I had neglected. Running, playing guitar, reading books I had always meant to finish. Piece by piece, I reclaimed myself. I also reconnected with friends I had unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. It wasn't until I sat with them over dinner, laughing at an old story, that I realized how much I had let my marriage isolate me. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. One evening, as I walked through the city, I saw a couple sitting in a cafe, lost in conversation, their hands intertwined. It should have made me bitter, but it didn't. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Hope. I wasn't afraid of love, of trust, of the unknown. I knew that one day I would open my heart again. But for now, I was happy being on my own. Moving forward wasn't about revenge or making someone else suffer. It was about choosing happiness, choosing peace. And that's exactly what I did.